Hello friends, welcome to the second episode of African Hero Storytelling with ALE team. And today we will be continuing with the story of Nelson Mandela. Let's begin. From 1948 through the 1990s, a single word dominated life in South Africa, and that word was apartheid. Apartheid kept the country's majority black population under the thumb of a small white minority. And this segregation began in 1948 after the National Party came to power. The party instituted policies of white supremacy, which empowered only white South Africans while further disenfranchising black Africans. Apartheid policies and past laws prohibited black people from entering urban areas without immediately finding a job. It was illegal for a black person not to carry a passbook. Black people could not marry white people, and they could not set up businesses in white areas. Everywhere from hospitals to beaches was segregated, and even education was restricted. And though apartheid was supposedly designed to allow different races to develop on their own, it forced black South Africans into poverty and hopelessness as they were restricted to certain areas. Though they were disempowered, black South Africans protested their treatment within apartheid. And in 1950s, the African National Congress initiated a mass mobilization against the racist laws called the Defiance Campaign. Black workers boycotted white businesses, went on strike, and staged non-violent protests. In response to the protest, the government declared a state of emergency, but that still didn't stop them. And although they continued, they were often met with police and state brutality. The state of emergency cleared the way for even more apartheid laws to be put in place. A subgroup of protesters, tired of what they saw as ineffective non-violent protests, embraced armed resistance instead. And among them was Nelson Mandela, who helped to organize a paramilitary subgroup of the ANC in 1960. And in 1961, he was arrested for treason and sentenced to life in prison for charges of sabotage. In 1961, Nelson Mandela co-founded and became the first leader of Umkhonto we Sizwe, which in English translates to Spear of the Nation, and this is also known as the MK. Under Mandela's leadership, MK launched a sabotage campaign against the government, which had recently declared South Africa a republic and withdrawn from the British Commonwealth. In January 1962, Mandela traveled abroad illegally to attend a conference of African nationalist leaders in Ethiopia. And on the 5th of August, shortly after his return, he was arrested and subsequently sentenced to 5 years in prison for leaving the country and inciting a 1961 workers' strike. The following July, police raided an ANC hideout in a suburb on the outskirts of Johannesburg and arrested a racially diverse group of MK leaders who had gathered to debate the merits of a guerrilla insurgency. Evidence was found implicating Mandela and other activists who were brought to stand trial for sabotage, treason, and violent conspiracy alongside their associates. Mandela and 7 other defendants narrowly escaped the gallows and were instead sentenced to life imprisonment during the Rivonia trial, which lasted 8 months and attracted substantial international attention. In a stirring opening statement that sealed his iconic status around the world, Mandela admitted to some of the charges against him while defending the ANC's actions and denouncing the injustices of apartheid. He ended with the following words: "I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve. But if need be, it is an idea for which I am prepared to die." Now let's talk about Nelson Mandela's years behind bars. Mandela spent the first 18 of his 27 years in jail at the brutal Robben Island prison, where he was confined to a small cell without a bed or a plumbing, and he was compelled to do hard labor in a lime quarry. As a black political prisoner, he received scantier rations and fewer privileges than other inmates. He was only allowed to see his wife once every 6 months. Mandela and his fellow prisoners were routinely subjected to inhumane punishments for the slightest of offenses. Now, these restrictions and conditions notwithstanding, while in confinement, Mandela earned a Bachelor of Law degree from the University of London and served as a mentor to his fellow prisoners, encouraging them to seek better treatment through non-violent resistance. Despite his forced retreat from the spotlight, Mandela remained the symbolic leader of the anti-apartheid movement. In 1980, Oliver Tambo introduced a Free Nelson Mandela campaign that made the jailed leader a household name and fueled the growing international outcry against South Africa's racist regime. And as pressure mounted, the government offered Mandela his freedom in exchange for various political compromises, including the renouncement of violence and recognition of the independent Transkei Bantustan, but he categorically rejected these deals. And in 1982, Mandela was moved to Pollsmoor prison on the mainland. In 1988, he was placed under house arrest on the grounds of a minimum security correctional facility. The following year, the newly elected president lifted the ban on the ANC and called for a non-racist South Africa, breaking with the conservatives in his party. On February 11, 1990, he ordered Mandela's release. And there you have it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening to this point. Kindly remember to share with your friends and also do well to like this and subscribe to our channel. I'll see you next week.